And what are you motivated by? Are you just motivated by that outcome? Because man, that outcome might be 5 or 10 years down the road. Or, what can we be motivated along the way in that journey to keep us fired up and passionate and energetic?
Hello, Business of Happiness Hive. Welcome to today's episode. Today we are speaking with Angela Demaree. She is a CEO, veteran, author, consultant, podcast host, veterinarian, politician, and a leader. My gosh, this woman seems to do it all. I'm so excited for you to meet her. This conversation was fascinating to me because I just wanted to know, number one, how does she do it all? Where does this fall in her journey? What is this extremely multi-passionate woman doing to make it all happen? And then to learn a little bit about when did it fall apart and what perspective did she take along the way? She has a great perspective as well to the 5 things we most need to know in order to achieve our dreams, and the one key decision to unlocking the next step when you're feeling stuck. So join me today as we welcome Angela Demaree. Hello and welcome to the Business of Happiness podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Tarryn MacCarthy, and today is going to be such a good day, you guys. We have with us Angela Demaree. Welcome, Angela.
Hi, it's so great to see you today. Thanks for having me, Tarryn.
I'm so happy to have you here today, Angela, because what drew me to you and the conversations that we've been having that are so exciting to me that I cannot wait to share with my audience is the fact that you are so multi-passionate, multi-successful. You just live such a fascinating life. For those of you who don't know Angela, she is a CEO, veteran, author, consultant, podcast host, veterinarian, politician, and all-round leader, which is just so beautiful to me that you are this kaleidoscope of fascinating things. And I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about your professional journey and how you incorporate all these incredible things in your life.
Yes. And Tarryn, like we've discussed before, we aren't just doctors, right? We aren't just dentists or orthodontists or veterinarians. And so often when we introduce ourselves, it's what do you do? And that's all we are. But we have all of these different aspects to our lives, these hobbies, these interests. And I think you've used the word multi-passionate before. So really, it's been an interesting journey, right? Like I, like so many people, went to vet school thinking I was going to just spend my entire life in private practice. I was super passionate about equine sports medicine and surgery. I was licensed in 4 states, traveled around with the racehorses on the grand circuits, and kind of got a little bit bored. The horses were going around in a circle the same way every day. A lot of the injuries were similar, the overuse injuries, and keeping professional athletes healthy and safe, it was similar every day. And so I said, I love this. I'm really enjoying myself, but I think there's something more. And when I was in vet school, I had this interest and I'm going to pursue it. And so an opportunity came up and I actually applied for a position out in Washington, D.C. to be a lobbyist on behalf of the veterinary profession, got the job, and off to D.C. I went. And so it's like one of these things where we're like, well, when and how do we pursue these interests? And when we have opportunities, do we take them? And then, we had those injuries. You might remember in the Kentucky Derby and 8 bells breaking down and some of those other injuries while I was out in DC at the time. And my love of horse racing came back up. And lo and behold, there was this great opportunity back home to become the equine medical director of the Indiana Horse Racing Commission. So I picked up my bags and moved home and served in that role for 5 years, had an amazing opportunity to actually present original research at an international conference, just do some really incredible and fun things. And then the governorship changed and my position was eliminated. And while all of this was going on in the background, I had just recently been deployed. I joined the Army when I was out in Washington, D.C. And I come home, I deploy, I come home, I need several service-connected surgeries. I end up having 3 surgeries in 6 months, impacting all my major core muscles, my abdomen, my back, my hip. And 2 weeks before that third final service-connected surgery, I got the notice that my position was being eliminated. Thank you so much for your service. I was going to be on crutches for 6 to 8 weeks. I couldn't go back into practice. Didn't know, how I'd be able to stand, walk. I was an equine practitioner, right? Like, what am I going to do with my life now? So through all of this, boy, I spent a long time with that victim mentality and feeling pretty sorry for myself as I was recovering. But it was also this super amazing opportunity to say, what is it I really want to do in life? And for the first time, I felt like I had that opportunity to say, wow, I lived my life and I said, I want to be a veterinarian. And they said, well, then you're going to go to Purdue and you're going to do this. And here's the steps. And everywhere I went, I said, this is what I want to do. And they said, well, here's your next step. And off I went. I'd never taken the time to ask myself, what was it that I wanted to do? So I had that amazing opportunity and I started taking stock in what can I still do? All right, well, I can stand, I can walk, and I can talk. And I know how politics works. So when my member of Congress refused to meet with me, I said, I shouldn't have greater access as a lobbyist than I do as a constituent. That's not okay. I'm going to run for Congress. Wow. And so I did. And while I was recovering from all of these surgeries, I decided to launch a congressional campaign. I do not recommend that, but sometimes we have these weird opportunities at these weird times. And it was, I'm here in Indiana, I'm very moderate, middle of the road. I think most people here in Indiana are. I fall on the Democratic side of things. And I said, as an R+8 district, you'll never win. Why bother? We ended up, because of the effort we put forth, actually put this district on the map, where the DCCC actually had it as a contested race in 2020. So
wow, amazing.
Yeah. And this is just, you can't allow others to define success for you, right? Like, you have a choice to say, well, I could have said, well, we lost, so therefore it was a bust. Or I can say, wow, we now had a more responsive member of Congress. She was meeting with her constituents more regularly. That was the impact I wanted to create. We put this district on the map and showed everybody what was possible, that this was more moderate district than had ever been thought of before. And it was because we were able to put together a compelling case to show others what we knew to be possible.
That's really cool. I love that perspective shift about what the success really was from that situation. Have you always had that ability to look at the current situation from a positive vantage, or is this something you had to learn?
I don't know if I would characterize it as a positive vantage point, but it's like, okay, here are the cards we're dealt. How else can we put them together? How can we shift the perspective? What are we missing here? And so I'm that really annoying person in the meetings that says, oh, but we haven't considered this. We haven't considered that. And I'll argue all these other points of view, even if they aren't my point of view, just to make sure we've thought through all of the things.
That's interesting. So where do your dreams lie now? You've done all these amazing things. Where are your passions most fueling your actions now?
Yeah. So again, several different areas, as you might have imagined, but they all fall under my purpose in life, right? Like, I'm very clear that for me, improving the lives of people and animals through public health, innovation, and technology and advocacy are sort of the common thread that ties this all together for me. And, you might look at my career and think, man, this doesn't make any sense. But when you have it through that lens of your purpose, now it suddenly makes a lot of sense, and you can see how it all ties together. Or at least for me, that's my perspective. So I have had a really interesting year, sort of reevaluating what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, what's next for me. Those surgeries were back in 2014 and 2015. That's been about 6 years or so of recovery. And now I'm like, okay, here we are. This is what we're dealt with, like a little bit of chronic pain, but basically recovered. My horse has been a huge piece of that puzzle for me. And so I'm like, everything really centers around him. And I have some really cool goals that I'm not quite ready to share around some keynote speaking and involving my horse and really doing some really cool, innovative things there. So I said, and I've said this to myself, and I heard myself say this just like on a walk. I'm outside walking the dog, and I'm like, wouldn't it be great if I could spend my entire day out with the horses and have money to support that? And then I took a step back and I went, oh my gosh, how could I do that? So I started looking around, seeing what the opportunities were, and found a barn where the trainer really aligns with my values. As we always talk about, values are so incredibly important. 30 minutes from my house, closer to home. A lot of things are just aligning there. And then it was like, well, how am I going to finance all of this? How is that going to be possible? And these recruiters were talking to me, and I was like, no, I'm not interested. And finally I said, you know what? Let's have a conversation here. So I can still work as a 1099 employee, contractor in veterinary medicine, and actually travel and show my horse, because they also have some travel components. So I can work as a relief veterinarian and have the finance side of things, churning along, have my business, my business as a high performance coach, as a podcast host. It relies on my laptop and my phone and the internet. Well, you can have that anywhere. And so I was like, but ever since I was a little girl, I was like, man, when I see the Olympics, and maybe, when we watch the Olympics, something, is rekindled in us, whether we're watching gymnastics or tennis or basketball. And for me, it's the equestrian sports. And I said, man, I'd really love to be competitive. I'd really love to know what that's like, and to really put forth the effort to see how far I could go in this equestrian sport. And so this is going to give me a great opportunity to do that, to actually show people firsthand how I've done all the other things I've done. People are always asking me, how did you do that? And I tell them and show them, and there's like a little bit of a disconnect still. So I'm like, okay, so here in real time, I'm going to reorganize my life, get things moving, and see how it all goes. And then the third thing I've got going on that's super exciting is our startup company. And we actually have this amazing technology that can measure in real time individual doses to make sure that pets are getting the exact amount of medicine that's prescribed exactly for them, in the right dose, the right flavor, all of those things. And so we're working right now with cancer research, because those drugs have such a narrow therapeutic margin. And if you get those doses off by like plus or minus 10%, that's traditionally okay in compounding pharmacies, it might be too much or not enough. So I'm really excited about that as well.
Oh, what I love about your story and your response to this question, Angela, is I can just feel the passion when you're talking about those things, when you're getting excited about being in the equestrian world in a more permanent way, or when you're talking about supporting those pets who need medicine dosages supported, or at least particularly and specifically modified so that they get the right dosages. I can hear how much you care about it. And I love that following your passion gives you the fuel to keep doing these amazing things. How much do you think passion matters in terms of finding room to do everything? You said people keep asking you, how do you do it all? How much do you think passion plays into that? If you're listening to this podcast, chances are you didn't get into business to be miserable. The problem is that people feel that if their business gets busier, if they start becoming more successful, that happiness will eventually set in. but it can actually get worse. This is why I created the Business of Happiness Prosperity Coaching. In this one-on-one coaching, we look at how to redefine success on your terms and re-find the joy and the passion in your dream. Visit me at thebizofhappiness.com and become the happiest business owner you know.
That's such a great question. And I don't want to say hesitant to answer it because we hear these words passion, right? And passion can just flame out. Like I could be super excited and passionate about something, and then like tomorrow real life happens again. In an hour, like real life happens again. The bills come, this happens. How do we figure it out? And so I think passion, if you tie it to purpose, can be really, really important, impactful. And that kind of goes to like motivation and inspiration, right? Like two sides of the same coin again. And so when we're really working through, and what I like to say are like the 5 most important things to really chasing your dreams and to know about yourself when you're redesigning the life of your dreams, is really to be aligned with your values. Know what your values are. How do you align your day with them? Do you want to wake up to an alarm clock? Do you value sleep? What are your values? How do you want your day to go? Do you want to have every afternoon off with your kids? Do you not want to go to work until 3 p.m.? Like all of these things are possible most of the time, but you have to get really clear on what those are, what your boundaries are around those values to support those values. Like we talked about that purpose, and it's not just about our purpose, it's about being productive with purpose. So I think that ties in a little bit to your question around passion. It's like not just enough to be passionate. It's not just enough to be productive, but we have to be productive and passionate with purpose behind it. And then those two sides of the same coin with motivation and inspiration. So what drives that necessity to launch yourself out of bed every day, fired up for all the things you have to do, whether you want to do them or not, because they're so important. There's so much meaning. There's so much purpose behind it. And what are you motivated by? Are you just motivated by that outcome? Because man, that outcome might be 5 or 10 years down the road. Or, what can we be motivated along the way in that journey to keep us fired up and passionate and energetic along the way?
I love it. I love it. So tell me again, I'm taking notes here, Angela, those 5 things. I know you mentioned your values, and one of the things you mentioned was boundaries, the boundaries. Expand on that just a little bit more.
Sure. So when we talk about boundaries, so many of us say, we forget to ask in the beginning of our day. And I think this is a great tool. And I challenge all of your listeners to do this today, is at the beginning of the day or the night before, sit down and look at what you've got going on. Okay, I've got to be at work. I have these meetings, and I've got my kids' soccer practice. And then ask yourself today, what can I be swayed on? Is it going to be okay today for me to work late and miss that soccer practice? Or is today one of those days where I'm bringing the cupcakes and it's my kid's birthday and we're having a party at Chuck E. Cheese and having pizza afterwards? And so, no, it's not okay. I'm going to show up today, and that's going to be my boundary at work, that I can't work late today. And I'm going to set my day up. I'm going to let everyone know. I'm going to communicate that boundary when I get to work. So it's not a surprise at the end of the day that this is what's happening. And when that emergency calls, I'm not going to be available. They need to go to the emergency clinic.
I love that idea of setting yourself up for success from the beginning of your day, because I know so many of my listeners who are high achieving, successful business owners and leaders in their professions, we sometimes create these to-do lists that are completely unachievable in a day. So I can just see the power behind setting those important boundaries at the beginning of the day. That's awesome. So
there's no right or wrong. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt here.
No, go ahead.
There's no right or wrong. Some days are going to be different than others. And it's going to be an ebb and flow, because we've all got different things going on in our lives. And some days it's going to be okay to work late. Some days it's not. But knowing each day where we are and making sure we maintain that boundary, boy, we're going to feel so much better at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So going back again, just list those 5 things for me.
Sure. So number one, and I think most importantly, our values. Secondly is those boundaries. If we don't maintain those boundaries, we're really going to struggle to live into those values we just set for ourselves. And then purpose is number three. And I always love to remind myself to be productive or passionate with purpose. And then 4 and 5 are motivation and inspiration. And what ties into that is that necessity and having enough energy.
Yeah, absolutely. So setting boundaries around those as well would be really important to make sure that you're being able to support yourself so that you can show up to do all those amazing things. Another thing that you talk about in your coaching is the one key to unlocking that next step. Like when we're feeling stuck or stumped, what is that one key that we need to focus on in order to know how to move forward?
Oh, yes. I love talking about the key decision. And I had this really interesting moment this year, and I can share some of the successes and failures from my own life. But I like to say that, there's 5 areas of life. We can argue there's 8 or 10 or whatever, but, our careers, our mission, right, is one. Our health, our personal health, our well-being, our physical health, our mental health. And then 3 is finances. Are we meeting our financial goals? Why are we not? 4 is our spirit. Are we lit up? Are we aligned? Are we living into our hobbies, travel, or spiritual life? And then relationships. And relationships is really probably up there with number 2, health number 1, but you can reorder these however you like. But, are we maintaining our relationships? Are we happy with our relationships, either at home or at work? And so when we look at those 5 areas of life, so often there might be one key decision we have been avoiding making that is like a stick stuck in the spokes of our bike. That if you remember when you were a little kid and you were riding your bike and you stuck a stick in there and you couldn't go forward, it just jammed up all the inner workings. If you move that stick, if you make that key decision, it will propel you forward because you've got all this momentum kind of trying to go forward, but you're stuck. And so often there's something really important that we've been avoiding. And if we say, what would happen if I make that decision? And if you're pushing really hard against that, I do caution you to take a step back and take that pressure off first. Because if you move that stick and you pedal real hard, man, you're going flying over that handlebars, flat on your face. I had that experience already this year. So just a word of caution, do it anyway, but make sure you don't have so much pressure on that you kind of fly over those handlebars. And, it just really can unlock so many other areas of your life when you get clear on what that one key thing is.
So can you give us an example?
Yeah. So I made the decision. I said, okay, what decision in my life could I make to improve my health, my finances, my relationships, my hobbies, and my career? And I said, if I move my horse to a barn, if I move my horse to an eventing barn, and where my friends are, that's closer to home, I have less expense of driving, less time in the car. I can put more effort and time into the business. We never have enough time. So it frees up all this time and energy, and I can accomplish those goals. And, on and on it went. And it was just so lovely. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. I moved him in April during spring, crazy horses in the springtime. I don't recommend doing that. And he ended up getting hurt. And I had to move him back to some of my friends are in Chicago. They have a barn up there. I used to practice in the area. I knew the farriers. I just moved him to Chicago because it's the path of least resistance. Here it's been 6-7 months later. And I've kept up with this. Maybe I should have been a little more thoughtful when I was making this decision. Where I was, they were like, oh, we're going to retire. You're going to have to find another place. I was a little bit panicked. And so now that I've had 7 months to recalibrate this decision, I found I've gotten all the pieces of the puzzle lined up a little more eloquently to set myself up for success.
That's really cool. I think it reminds me that sometimes that stick in the spokes of your wheel is facing a difficult conversation, and that jams everything else up. And if you can just find the courage to have that difficult conversation, everything else starts to flow freely again. So I love that idea of, what is it? Is there possibly just one stick stuck there that if you just have a different action or perspective, you can change everything? I love that idea. That's so cool. I love hearing about your journey. I love hearing about all your experiences. Have loved following you and also listening to you on your podcast. Can you tell my audience a little bit about where they can find you and learn more about you and have access to these really cool coaching programs that you have?
Sure. Well, I'd love to invite everybody to check out the Beyond the Stethoscope podcast. It's everywhere that you are listening to this podcast right now. Also, you can follow me on any of the social media channels at Demaree DVM. And I've got this really cool resource. It's what I like to call your solution to decision fatigue. So when these great opportunities come up and you're like, I am too exhausted to even try to figure out how to answer this, it is based on your values. So you do have to know a little bit of your values and your boundaries and do a little bit of the homework first, but you can go to pawsconsulting.com/5 MIN decision. And it's a free downloadable worksheet that you can all get access to. And if any of you are interested in running for office, I do run some accelerator programs and help first-time political candidates, especially those subject matter experts who are super smart and talented, and you know how to actually help and improve those things in your community. So you can hop on over to pawsconsulting.com as well, or send me a DM, and I'd love to have a conversation with you.
PAWS.
Yes. PAWS.
Love it. Love it. So, Angela, what do you think is your superpower?
Oh my goodness. So two things I think are my superpowers. A lot of folks would probably tell you from just my history and experience being a lobbyist in Washington, D.C., having run for Congress, and what I get asked to do probably the most often in my business is turning difficult to understand scientific concepts into easy to understand sound bites.
Mm-hmm.
And then what I love doing, and what I would naturally say would be my superpower, but it's maybe a little more hidden, is really being able to look at the big picture of a situation and draw conclusions or parallels to seemingly disparate, or putting together those pieces of the puzzle in maybe a different way, or seeing what's possible in a very different situation. So it may not be obvious. Like you might have all these puzzle pieces and none of them line up and none of them match, and you're like, what are we going to do with this? And I really love coming up with new and inventive ways to put that together and to see what's possible and what's next.
Oh, I love that superpower. That's really cool. Really cool. What is your definition of happiness?
Well, my definition, I think, of success and happiness is probably the same. And that would be just to be able to ride my horse whenever I want, and to be able to work whenever I want, and just to line up my day in ways that are meaningful to me in this moment.
That's really cool. Really cool. I just have to honor you for all that you're doing and for all the different arenas in your life that you have touched with this passion and this commitment to excellence as well. So thank you for all that you do. And thank you for everything you bring to your coaching and to the podcast as well, to share this great insight with our community. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Tarryn. You have a wonderful day.
I want to ask you before you go, I have one more question for you.
Of course.
My final question to you: if all of this incredible work that you've done, all of your great podcast, of all your practices and workbooks that you've written for everybody to use and to take advantage of, if all of that were to disappear, Angela, I know it's terrible to even imagine, but if all of that were to disappear and you could leave us with one soundbite of impact on how to find happiness and success in your life, what would that be?
I choose to believe that the world is conspiring for me.
That's a great, great motto to have on a daily basis. That's awesome. Thank you for that. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us today. And thank you, Angela, for being a part of this valuable conversation.
Oh, thank you for all you do, Tarryn. I love the podcast and I so appreciate your time and for inviting me on.
Wonderful. And to all of you out there, please remember, when you feel good, that's when you can do good. Bye-bye.